As we just heard, believe it could have just been a missile that missed its target and could have been fired by either side. But will this ultimately impact Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine? Let's talk about this now. More with retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. He's here now. He's a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities, a Washington-based think tank. Lieutenant Colonel Davis, thank you so much for joining us here on Newsy. First off, what is your reaction to this strike inside Poland?
Yeah, my first reaction is that we need to make very clear that we don't want this situation to escalate. This has been one of my concerns from the very beginning, that whether by accident or miscalculation or mistake, something like this could happen that could inadvertently draw NATO into it. And of course, with the ever-present Article 5 obligations out there, that's always something that's going to get a lot of people spun up. And it certainly has been doing that here. Now, fortunately, so far, really all the evidence indicates that this was an error. It was a mistake of some sort. Definitely was not an intentional attack. I mean, obviously, Russia would have nothing to gain by shooting a tractor in Poland. I mean, it would have only negative things. And the most likely result is it's probably an S-300 anti-air defense missile from Ukraine that either missed one of these cruise missiles from Russia or just veered off course and landed in Poland. And in any case, it's a tragic accident especially for the people in Poland who were killed. But we just need to make sure that this does not escalate any further and that we don't do anything to potentially take this war beyond the borders of Ukraine.
Yeah, and Lieutenant Colonel, you called this, I believe, the most consequential day of the war so far. Is that because NATO could, in fact, as you were mentioning, get drawn into this?
Well, that was one of the possibilities, but it's what happened even before that that made it so consequential, because earlier today, the day started with President Zelensky at the G20 laying out what he called a peace plan, which really was nothing but an invitation for the Russian side to completely surrender and leave the country. So it really wasn't a genuine diplomatic initiative, which, of course, has the result that it's going to make Russia mad. And then right after that, a couple of hours later, you see this massive bombing campaign, the largest of the war. That was one of the biggest things kind of lost in all the talk about this Polish missile here, is that Ukraine suffered the worst attack it's had since the war began. Now, they started the day having 40% of their energy infrastructure already destroyed. And now on top of that, you have this new one, and that's going to make it enormously difficult for Ukraine to even heat their houses, to have any kind of electricity, to have any kind of economic activity. And there's already talk among especially in Kiev, the mayor is asking people that, hey, you need to consider if you can go to somewhere else where there's electricity and heat, you need to go there, because we may not be able to support you in Kiev.
Yeah, with winter coming as well, the temperatures dropping. Let's talk a little bit about the U.S. obligations to NATO should a country get drawn into conflict. How does that work?
Yeah, what happens is the Article 5 of the NATO Charter says that an attack on anyone is an attack on all of them. And so what that would, if one of them was attacked, then it would create basically a conference where people would get together to find out what the facts are, and whoever was attacked would lay out the case. And if they were attacked, then that would trigger the remainder of the articles, especially Article 11, where each nation would then do whatever it could to support the country that was attacked. And that doesn't have to include kinetic activity. It can also provide other kinds of support. But that's what would trigger it. Of course, most people just think that Article 5 means you automatically go to war, but that's just not the case. But it is very, very seriously, as it's the very heart of the whole security by the group here. Everybody's looking out for each other. So yeah, sure. That's the heart of it, really.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel, last question. How should NATO react to this?
Well, what NATO should do is just make very clear that we want to do everything in our power to make sure this war does not escalate and does not expand beyond the borders of Ukraine. Because as much as we want to help Ukraine, we have an obligation first and foremost to all the NATO populations to make sure that war doesn't come to their shores. And in fact, ironically, in 2019, the government had a a simulation that one of my friends at 1945, Harry Kazianis, was participated in that predicted a war, not predicted, but projected a war between Russia and Ukraine that got out of control, and a missile struck into Poland that did trigger Article 5. And that could so easily turn into, and in fact, in the simulation, did turn into a nuclear strike. And that is a very real possibility. And you see that it looks like we dodged a bullet here, because if that missile had, instead of hitting a tractor, had accidentally hit an American convoy, a NATO military facility of some sort, then you've got a whole different ballgame, and there would be a very different situation right now. And that's why this is so crucial that we keep this thing from escalating.
It's about as scary as it gets. All right. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel Davis. We really appreciate your time and insights tonight on this topic.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Still ahead tonight, we explore the mental health struggles teens face today and discuss just how different the experience can be for girls compared to boys. And there are now 8 billion people living on Earth, where some of the fastest growing populations can be found straight ahead.
Attention Marines and family members who spent time at Camp Lejeune.
If you spent time on base at Camp Lejeune prior to 1988 and developed any of these cancers or suffered any of these injuries, you may be eligible for significant financial compensation. Call Camp Lejeune victims to discuss your case now.
Leaking underground tanks contaminated the drinking water with benzene and other highly carcinogenic